What exactly is taking all of these games so long to develop? Insomniac Game Studios, which is a large AAA game studio, is announcing games which are going to allegedly take 5 to 6 years to develop. We are not going to get Spider-Man 3, which is almost certainly going to be an asset flip of Spider-Man 2, which was an asset flip of Spider-Man 1, until 2028. And this was announced in 2023. It would be different if this was something that was isolated to Insomniac, but this is what's happening all over the game industry. Any type of game, for some reason now, is taking 7+ years to develop. And how did it get like this? The Wolverine leaks, which I can't show, you can find them on YouTube or TikTok, essentially showed footage from a build, I believe, from 2022. And the footage showed what looked like a version of the game that, in my opinion, was about 70% complete. I mean, there were some missing animations here or there, and there was some, lighting, whatever, some messed up camera things, but ultimately it looked like the game was mostly complete and was in sort of like an alpha state, and it looked like it was about a year out from release. And remember, this was in 2022, so we can assume that the game being in the state that it's in right now has probably been through at least 2 to 3 years of development already. So by the time Wolverine is coming out, is going to be in 2026. 2026. That's 2 years from now, plus the development time that's already had. So we're looking at this game. We're looking at almost a 6-year game dev cycle from a game that's probably going to have been almost entirely reused assets. The question is, why is this happening? Why are we not getting a Ratchet and Clank until 2029? Why are we not getting X-Men until 2030? Do these people really think that we're still going to be sitting around and playing these Marvel slop games 6 years from now? What are they doing? This is something that is not even isolated to the AAA industry. Even smaller scale games, even games that are I would consider to not be AAA, are taking 7+ years to develop. And I think that really the only thing that we can look for to blame this upon, the number one, the work ethic of the people who are developing these games, and also the chain of command. I think, contrary to popular belief, these large AAA companies like Activision and EA are pretty much the same as they were in the early 2000s as far as the corporate top-down sort of food chain goes, right? Corporate orders game devs to do something, they have to do it. And it was pretty brutal even back in the early 2000s. However, they were still able to pump out some extremely high-quality games. But now what we see is a shift in the people who are making games. Now we have the lazy millennial devs. We're getting these constant COVID work-from-home games that are half-baked, reused asset flips. Another great example of this is Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That game took 7 years almost to develop. So I have theorized that if this is actually not the fault of the giant corporations, as they have for the most part remained the exact same, at least in the West they have. Things like Tencent have a large stock in what's going on in modern game development, but that's sort of besides the point. I think that that's somewhat isolated to the mobile games and games that are made for people who are, well, mentally challenged, like League of Legends. Think about it logically for 2 seconds, though. If these corporations are what's causing these games to take 7 years to develop, it really doesn't make sense really just from a financial perspective. Wouldn't they want these games to be pumped out as quickly as possible so they can pay less wages and pay less resources for it overall? It doesn't make sense for things to take 7 years to develop. That's why my logic, why my headspace is leading me to think that this is actually a developer, this is a employee, a worker problem, not a corporation or culture problem. But what we also see, and the reason why I'm not blaming these giant corporations, is that we're not even going to go back as far as the early 2000s. Let's go back and look at major AAA releases of 10 years ago, right? Let's take a look at a game like Black Ops 2, Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Those games are 7th gen titles. They're only about 10 years old, but Black Ops 2 game runs great, it's optimized well. It's the same thing with Black Ops 1, and those are two gigantic major AAA games that are on 2-year development cycles. The question is, Where is that today? Where are these games that people are going to remember forever? They don't exist anymore. It's not because corporations are slamming down on creativity. I mean, there's many reasons why that could be. It's apparent when we look at the file sizes and the terrible optimization of these modern games that are gigantic releases. I mean, look at games like Hogwarts Legacy. 100 plus gigabytes. Really, any release in the year 2023 has been like 150 to 200 gigabytes in terms of release. That new Spider-Man game that just dropped is over 100 gigabytes. When you look at the actual upgrade that it has compared to the PS4 and even the 7th gen titles, I mean, it really doesn't make sense why these games are 100 plus gigabytes. I know personally that I don't have an SSD that's larger than 500 gigabytes, which I'm sure these days are inexpensive, but I mostly store my games on a large external hard drive. And now these games like Spider-Man and Baldur's Gate and these large titles, for some reason, they are dependent upon the SSD. This would be okay if it didn't seem like a crutch that these games were leaning upon, right? Because I'm not seeing the lightning fast load speeds that the SSD actually provided when it came to things like operating system load times. It was a total night and day difference. We're talking you'd have to wait upwards of 2 to 3 minutes for the operating system to load when you turn on your computer to an instant, like instantly your computer's on, instantly your operating system is on. We're not seeing that with games. And I think that it boils down to the fact that most of these games are being poorly optimized with bloat, as well as being outsourced overseas, which I suppose is a corporate thing. But at the same time, the bits that aren't outsourced in games like Starfield, Spider-Man 2, it's just lazy developers. But it's not just outsourcing, it's also lazy in-house developers. I'd like to see exactly what these people do on a day-to-day basis, because I truly do not believe that with these people doing their work-from-home jobs, their COVID jobs, these COVID games, I just truly don't believe that they're actually doing any work on these games. When you have 7+ years to deliver a product, and you hardly, especially when the product is something that's essentially made entirely out of reused assets, I would wager to say that the majority of in-house development time these days is spent waiting for 2 weeks to get the go on decisions from corporate, or literally just waiting around sipping their soy lattes, sipping their frappuccinos, and eating snacks, as we've seen in a lot of these do-nothing jobs. With the combination of outsourcing and these gigantic development teams of 1,000+ people, and I think that with the use of new tools which allow developers to cut corners with things like lighting and AI and doing art and whatnot, we're just getting shittier and shittier and lazier with the products that we're getting. I am actually interested in what people are thinking right now. Am I the only one that's thinking that this is no longer just a problem with corporations, but instead this is lazy millennial developers? Is it a effect of COVID? Is it a microcosm of the effect of the world that we live in right now? Why the fuck is everything taking 7 to 8 years to develop games that were made in terms of the same scope and the same content 10 years ago? It would take them 2 to 3 years to make. Why is all this happening? What do you people think? I think that corporations definitely play a big part in this, but at the same time, we have to recognize that there's a large group of people who are working in the video game industry who, quite frankly, hate video games. They hate people who play video games. They hate you. They don't want you to play video games. And on top of that, all that they do is they go on Twitter all day and whine. We can't just continue to blame corporate culture and crunch culture and this and that when we clearly are seeing a problem with the people who are developing the product now. Do you think it's corporations? Do you think it's a microcosm of the world we live in? Do you think it's the fact that video games are billion-dollar projects and not, products of passion anymore? I've heard that a lot, but quite frankly, I don't really think that's the only case. Do you agree with me? Do you think it's lazy millennial devs? What do you think? I'm really interested to see what exactly people are thinking at the moment about this, because I can't be the only one who's had this same thought of why the fuck is everything taking so long to develop. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I totally want to some black. Just saying. I'm so